China unveiled its global security initiative on Tuesday. Chinese state media report the paper lays out core concepts and principles regarding global peace and security. Meanwhile, the country's foreign minister Wang Yi says Beijing was deeply concerned about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine and called for negotiations and peace for the sake of the world and Europe in particular. The foreign minister's statement comes ahead of his visit to Moscow later today. Joining me now is Johanny Pre-Herman, director of the Minsk Dialogue Council on International Relations. Thank you very much for joining me this morning.
Pleasure is mine.
What do you make of the Chinese foreign minister's statements? The foreign ministry is calling for peace negotiations?
Well, I think that's been China's position since even before the war started. And it's clear that the war and all the diplomatic and political circumstances that accompany the war create multiple difficulties for the Chinese that they want to overcome. And it's very natural to try to overcome those difficulties mainly through diplomatic initiatives. But of course, it still remains to be seen what exactly they're going to present in those initiatives, because they've been talking about the global security initiative for about a year. And I think so far it's been more rhetoric than substance.
Is this a signal China wants to act as a mediator? And if that's the case, is China really the best candidate?
Well, China wants to act, and whether it's going to provide any mediatory services or its role is going to be different, it's a different matter. I think it just wants to be an actor, and it wants to stress that it has its own interests when it comes to not just the war, but also what kind of world is going to emerge after the war, but also, most importantly, what kind of confrontation between China and the U.S., China and the West, is going to be seen in light of this war. So those things matter for the Chinese, and this why I think it's only natural that Beijing is trying to be active on those things.
The foreign minister's visit to Moscow comes after a private meeting with Blinken. Do you think he has any sort of message to convey from Blinken to Moscow?
Well, most probably yes, even though I think all those messages are very well known to the Russians, and as we understand, there are still channels of communication functioning between the different layers of Russian and American governments. And it was stated just yesterday before President Biden's visit to Ukraine that in order to deconflict the situation, the Russians had been warned a little bit in advance of this visit. So it means that the communication is there, and there is no urgent need for the Chinese to pass any messages. But I think it's it's still an important key actor when it comes to global politics and so what kind of world we are going to get in decades to come. And that's why, of course, China's words and opinions matter not only to the Americans but to the Russians. That's quite obvious.
What do you make of Biden's surprise visit to Kyiv? Does it signify a change in policy of any sort?
Well, clearly not. It only signifies determination, at least political determination, to continue the policy that has been there. And we all understand that there are quite some difficulties when it comes to American domestic politics in terms of continuing the support on the very same level and scale that has been there. So I think the Biden administration is trying to ensure that at least, for the year to come, it's going to enjoy domestic support for its policy in Ukraine, but also it wants to reassure both its allies in Europe that they have to play a bigger role. That's been, as you know, the key message from Washington when it comes to the EU and other NATO allies. And it also wants to reassure the American public, from what I understand.
Johanny Pre-Herman, director of the Minsk Dialogue Council on International Relations. Thank you very much for providing your insight this morning.